All right, so we all know that saying money can't buy happiness, right?
Right.
But today, we're diving into some research that you sent over about the crossroads of love and money, and specifically how it affects relationships. And it's more than just splitting the bills, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it goes way deeper than that. Financial responsibility in a relationship, that can really be a make or break point for the emotional connection.
Hmm.
Think about it. You're managing expenses together, making these huge financial decisions as a couple, and planning for a future, together. That's all pretty emotionally loaded stuff.
Yeah, no kidding. So you're saying it's more than just the practical stuff? Like, it really ties into our emotional well-being as a couple.
Exactly. Like if one partner is struggling with debt or they're unemployed, that kind of stress just spills over into everything. It can affect your communication, your intimacy even. But what's super interesting to me is how money can be both this tool for expressing love and a huge source of conflict.
That's fascinating. So, like, I could see gift giving as a way to show love,
Yeah.
right? But how could that backfire?
Well, think about those big romantic gestures. Showering your partner with expensive gifts, always being the one to pick up the tab. Yeah, on the surface it seems generous, but sometimes it's masking deeper issues like control or even manipulation. And then there's the real dark side, financial infidelity.
Ooh, okay. Financial infidelity. That sounds kind of scary. I'm not even sure I've heard that term before. What does that mean exactly?
Basically, it's when you're keeping financial secrets from your partner. Maybe you have a secret credit card, or you're stashing cash away, or you're downplaying your debt. And that can be just as damaging as any other kind of betrayal. It just shatters that trust and intimacy.
Wow, yeah, I hadn't really thought about it like that. It seems like a lot of these problems could be avoided if couples just, like, plan their finances together more.
You're getting it. When couples make budgets together, savings plans, even retirement goals,
Yeah.
doing it as a team, that's an investment in the relationship itself. It's like they're building this sense of shared purpose and showing they're really in it for the long haul.
That makes a lot of sense. But what about the couples who don't do that? Are they doomed? How does, like, the lack of joint financial planning actually affect a relationship?
A lot of times it leads to misunderstandings, arguments, resentment, that kind of thing. Like, imagine one person's diligently saving for a house down payment while the other person's racking up credit card debt on impulse purchases. That difference in priorities, huge rift in the relationship.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's bound to breed some resentment.
Yeah.
But look, we all come from different backgrounds, right? And we have different experiences with money. So how do you even begin to navigate those differences as a couple?
Well, I think the first step is recognizing that financial differences aren't inherently bad. They often reflect stuff about our partners that we simply don't know yet. Maybe one person grew up with very little money while the other grew up with plenty. Those early experiences shape our financial scripts, so to speak, our beliefs and behaviors around money, even if we don't realize it.
Okay, I see. So there are all these layers to it. It's not just about the numbers in your bank account. It's also about the emotional and psychological baggage that we each bring into the relationship.
You got it. And the way to unpack those differences and avoid big blow-ups, communication. Lots and lots of communication.
Well, easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
I mean, money talks can be awkward, especially early on in a relationship. So how do you even approach these conversations without making things super weird?
You're right, it can be awkward. It's all about creating a safe space, finding the right time and place where both people feel comfortable being open and honest about their, you know, financial anxieties, their habits, even past mistakes.
So it's like laying the groundwork for a strong financial partnership by being vulnerable and transparent right from the start. And I guess as the relationship gets more serious, that need for transparency just keeps growing.
Oh, absolutely. As you start to build a life together, those money conversations need to evolve too. They've got to cover the practical things. Sure, debt, savings, but also hopes, dreams, and values. You want to make sure you're not only financially compatible on paper, but that your money's aligned with what you both truly want out of life.
That makes so much sense. It's like having a shared vision board, but for your finances. But what if you discover you have completely different ideas about what that future looks like? Like, what if one person's a spender and the other's a saver? Can you ever truly reconcile those differences?
That's a great question, and it's super common. It's not about like changing who you are at your core, but bridging those gaps.
So finding a compromise, a system that works for both of you.
Exactly. Maybe you work out a budget where each person has a certain amount of fun money to spend however they want, and the rest goes toward those shared goals. It's all about respecting each other's needs and making sure both people feel heard and valued.
I love that. But even with the best intentions, this could get tricky. What happens when those financial differences lead to conflict? How do you keep those disagreements from getting out of control?
That's where your communication skills really come into play. It's not just about talking, it's about really listening to your partner's concerns and trying to see things from their perspective.
Okay, active listening is key. But what if you're stuck in a loop, arguing about the same financial issues over and over? Where do you go from there?
Sometimes you need a little extra help to break those negative patterns. That's where financial therapy can be super valuable.
Oh, interesting. So it's like couples therapy, but for your finances. Tell me more about that.
Basically, financial therapy is all about addressing the emotional and relational side of money. It helps couples dig down and figure out the root causes of their money conflicts, and then they learn how to communicate in a healthier way.
That sounds incredibly beneficial. But where do you even find a qualified financial therapist?
The Financial Therapy Association is a great resource. They have a whole directory of certified therapists who specialize in this. The important thing is to find someone who really understands the ins and outs of relationships and those tricky emotional issues that tend to come up around money.
This has been really helpful. But let's be honest, money can be a really touchy subject. So how do you create a space where both partners feel comfortable being open about their financial anxieties and vulnerabilities? What does that safe space actually look like?
It's different for every couple, but there are some key ingredients. Choosing a time and place where you can talk without distractions, actively listening to each other without judgment, and focusing on collaboration instead of pointing fingers.
Those are some great tips. But what about the deeper stuff, the emotional issues that might be driving our financial behaviors, like past traumas or negative experiences? How do you unpack those without making things worse?
It all starts with self-awareness. Taking some time to reflect on your own financial history, your beliefs about money, and any anxieties or insecurities you might have.
So like a financial self-inventory.
Exactly. And then sharing those insights with your partner in a safe and supportive environment.
That could be a really powerful exercise for couples. But what about those big, life-changing financial decisions, like buying a house or investing in a business? How do you make sure you're both on the same page before taking those leaps?
Those are big decisions, and they require a lot of thought and open communication. It's important to talk about your individual financial goals and aspirations and figure out how to align those with your shared vision for the future.
So creating a joint financial roadmap, one that takes into account both your individual needs and those shared dreams.
Exactly. And remember, that roadmap isn't set in stone. It should evolve as your lives and priorities change over time.
That's reassuring to hear. Sounds like building a healthy financial relationship is an ongoing process that requires flexibility and adaptability.
Absolutely. It's a journey, not a destination. And it takes open communication, mutual respect, and a willingness to learn and grow together.
This has been such an enlightening conversation. I bet our listeners are feeling much more equipped to have those money conversations with their partners with more confidence and clarity.
I hope so. Remember, financial well-being isn't just about having a lot of money. It's also about feeling secure, empowered, and in control of your financial lives together.
Those are some powerful words. And we're just getting started. When we come back, we'll be digging into specific strategies for navigating those financial differences, building a shared vision, and creating a more harmonious financial partnership. So before the break, we were talking about how to have those, sometimes awkward money conversations and creating a safe space for open communication.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that those early conversations really set the tone for your whole financial partnership. It's kind of like you're building the foundation of a house. The stronger it is, the better it can weather any storms.
I like that, a good analogy. But let's be real for a second. Sometimes even with amazing communication, couples still hit those roadblocks when it comes to money. What are some of those common financial stressors that can really put a strain on a relationship?
Well, debt's a big one. It could be student loans, credit cards, even medical bills. Carrying that heavy financial burden can really create a lot of anxiety, stress, maybe even shame.
Debt can feel like this dark cloud hanging over your head. How does that actually play out, like in the day-to-day for couples? How does it affect their interactions?
Well, you might start getting into arguments about spending habits, right? Or resentment can build up over who's responsible for the debt. Some couples even start avoiding those financial conversations altogether.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So how can couples address the debt issue in a way that doesn't, totally damage the relationship?
I think the biggest thing is transparency. Be honest with each other about how much debt there is, work out a plan for paying it off together, and most importantly, offer each other support and encouragement along the way.
Support and encouragement, yeah. It's about being teammates, even when things are tough. But what about those times when it feels really overwhelming, like you're drowning in debt and you can't see a way out?
In those cases, it might be time to get some professional guidance. A financial advisor can be a huge help with creating a realistic budget, figuring out if debt consolidation's an option, and basically coming up with a solid plan to get back on track.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've talked about debt, but what are some other financial stressors that can affect couples?
Well, job loss or unemployment is another big one. Suddenly, there's this financial instability, this huge question mark hanging over your future, and that can put a strain on any relationship.
I can imagine, yeah. So how can couples like weather those choppy waters without letting the stress completely sink their relationship?
Again, it comes back to communication. It's so important to acknowledge those feelings that come up with job loss, the fear, the anxiety, the anger, and just offer each other support and reassurance.
Be each other's rock,
Right.
even when things feel shaky. But besides that emotional support, what are some practical things couples can do to deal with that financial strain?
Well, it might mean revising your budget, tightening things up a bit, maybe exploring some temporary sources of income or dipping into savings if you absolutely have to. It's about being proactive, tackling the problem together, and remembering that this is just a bump in the road, not the end of the road.
Yeah, great message. It's a reminder that even when things are hard, there's always hope and there's always a way to move forward. But even when couples aren't dealing with those big stressors like debt or job loss, they can still disagree about money, right? What are some of those common areas where conflict tends to pop up?
Spending habits are a classic one. One person might be really frugal while the other loves to spend. And those differences can cause some friction, especially if one partner feels like their needs or their values aren't being respected.
So it's not just about the money itself, it's more about what those spending habits represent.
Right. It might be about having different priorities, different values, even different ways of showing love.
So how do you bridge that gap between a saver and a spender? Is that even possible?
It is. It just takes compromise, empathy, and a willingness to meet in the middle. Maybe you create a budget with some fun money allocated to each person so they can spend freely, while the rest goes towards those shared goals and responsibilities.
I like that strategy. Finding a way to honor both individual expression and those shared financial goals. But what about the bigger financial decisions, like buying a house or planning for retirement? How do you make sure you're on the same page for those big ticket items?
Those definitely call for careful consideration and lots of open communication. It's about discussing your individual financial goals, your risk tolerance, and what you each envision for the future.
Basically aligning your aspirations so you're both heading in the same direction.
Exactly. But what if you find out you have totally different ideas about investing or what kind of house you want? How do you deal with those conflicting views? Communication and compromise are key, like always. Maybe you decide to get advice from a financial advisor who can give you some neutral guidance. Or maybe you agree to focus on one person's goals for a while and then switch to the other partner's goals later.
Great example of how compromise can work in action. But what if you just can't seem to agree? Like you hit a total impasse no matter how much you talk about it. What then?
Well, sometimes it helps to take a step back from the specific issue at hand and try to understand the deeper values and needs that are driving each person's perspective.
So instead of getting bogged down in the details, you're getting to the heart of the matter.
Exactly. Maybe one person is all about security and stability, while the other is focused on growth and opportunity. Once you understand those deeper motivations, it's easier to find a solution that feels aligned with your values as a couple.
This is all so insightful. It really highlights how communication is essential for navigating all these challenges. But let's be honest, it's not always easy to have these conversations, especially when emotions are running high. Any tips for keeping those money talks productive and respectful?
Absolutely. Timing is important. Choose a time and place where you can both be fully present and focused. Avoid having those tough conversations when you're tired, stressed, or already feeling emotional.
That's a great point. It's all about setting the stage for a calm and productive conversation. But what about when things do get heated? How do you stop those money talks from turning into a huge fight?
It can be helpful to set some ground rules, like maybe you agree to use I statements instead of blaming each other. Or you might decide to take a break if things get too intense and come back to it later when you've both had a chance to cool off.
Those are some great tips for managing conflict. But even with the best communication skills, sometimes couples just need that extra support. So what resources are out there for couples who need some professional guidance?
Financial therapy is a fantastic option. A financial therapist can help couples identify those underlying emotional and relational aspects that are affecting their financial lives. They can also provide tools and strategies for better communication, managing conflict, and building a more financially secure and fulfilling relationship.
Sounds incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
But what if you're not ready for therapy, but you still want to improve communication and collaboration as a couple? Are there other resources available?
Oh, tons. There are so many amazing books, podcasts, and online resources out there offering practical advice on managing money as a couple. You might even find some financial workshops or seminars in your community.
That's great, so many resources.
Yeah.
But where do you even begin with all that information? What would you recommend for couples just starting to explore all this?
I always recommend starting with a simple budget. There are tons of free budgeting apps and templates online. The most important thing is to find a system that works for both of you and that you can actually stick with.
Yeah, a budget is definitely a must-have tool. But beyond just managing the practical stuff, what about that emotional and relational side of things? Any tips for nurturing love, gratitude, and connection in your financial partnership?
One thing I encourage couples to try is expressing gratitude for each other's financial contributions, no matter how big or small. It could be acknowledging their hard work, thanking them for handling the bills, or just appreciating their willingness to be on the same team.
Yeah, those little gestures of appreciation can go a long way in creating a more positive and supportive financial environment. But what happens when financial stress starts to strain the relationship? How do you keep those money worries from taking over and overshadowing the love and connection?
Well, it's crucial to remember that you're in this together. Schedule those regular date nights, do things that help you connect and de-stress, and don't be afraid to seek professional help if you need it.
Great reminders that even when money's tight, love and connection can still flourish. But sometimes those financial woes feel like this giant elephant in the room. How do you talk about those sensitive topics without getting defensive or making each other feel bad?
I think it's about approaching the conversation with empathy and understanding. Instead of blaming each other, try to focus on your own feelings and needs. So instead of saying, you always overspend, you could say, I'm feeling a little anxious about our credit card debt. Can we talk about how to manage this together?
That's a great example of how the way you say something can make a huge difference. But what if your partner just doesn't want to talk about it, like they shut down completely or refuse to engage?
Creating that safe space where both people feel comfortable talking about money can take time and patience. Maybe you start by sharing some articles or podcasts about financial communication, or you suggest going to a financial workshop together.
Those are some good ideas for gently nudging the conversation forward. What about those deeper emotional issues that might be preventing financial intimacy? Things like past traumas or negative experiences with money. How do you address those sensitive topics without, ripping open old wounds?
You have to approach those conversations with a lot of sensitivity and compassion. If your partner is hesitant, don't push them. Just let them know that you're there for them when they're ready. And if those past experiences are causing real distress or impacting your relationship, seeking professional help from a therapist who specializes in trauma or financial therapy could be really helpful.
That's a good reminder that sometimes we need that extra support to heal those deeper wounds. But besides therapy, are there any other practices or rituals that can help couples cultivate a more loving and harmonious financial partnership?
I often suggest having regular money dates. It doesn't have to be anything formal or stressful. Just set aside some time each week or month to check in with each other about your finances, celebrate your wins, and tackle any challenges that might be popping up.
Money dates. I love that. It's like a date night, but your finances.
Exactly. It can be a fun way to stay connected, aligned, and on track with your goals. You could even make it a little ritual. Light some candles, pour a glass of wine, order takeout. The important thing is to make it enjoyable and part of your routine.
Okay, welcome back. We've covered a lot of ground already in this deep dive. Everything from communication strategies to dealing with those big financial stressors.
It has been quite a journey, hasn't it? But we're not done yet. There are still a few really important areas we need to touch on, especially when it comes to protecting yourself and your relationship.
Yeah, that's a good point. And one of the most difficult and, frankly, sensitive topics we need to talk about is financial infidelity.
Absolutely. I mean, it can be a huge betrayal of trust in a relationship. It's something we really need to be open and honest about.
So for anyone who might not know, can you explain what financial infidelity actually looks like? How does it show up in a relationship?
Well, it can take a lot of different forms, but it boils down to keeping money secrets from your partner. Maybe it's a hidden bank account, or you're piling up credit card debt without telling them, or even lying about how much you make.
Yeah, those are some serious betrayals. And I bet the fallout can be just as bad as any other kind of infidelity.
Oh, absolutely. Financial infidelity can destroy trust, create all sorts of resentment, and yeah, it can really lead to the end of a relationship.
It's tough to think about. But what if you suspect your partner might be doing something like that? What are some red flags to look out for?
Well, some things that might raise a red flag are like unexplained charges on your credit card statements, money missing from your joint accounts, or if your partner suddenly starts getting really secretive or defensive when you talk about money.
Yeah, those are definitely warning signs you can't ignore. So what's the best way to approach your partner if you're having those kinds of concerns?
Okay, well, the most important thing is to start by expressing your feelings and concerns, but in a calm and, non-accusatory way. Try to use I statements instead of you statements. So instead of saying, you're hiding money from me, you might say something like, I'm feeling a little anxious about these discrepancies I've noticed in our finances. Can we talk about it?
That's a good reminder. Approaching those tough conversations with empathy and understanding is so key. But what if your partner just denies everything or refuses to even talk about it? What then?
Well, if they keep dodging the issue or the behavior continues, it might be time to consider getting some professional help, like from a therapist or counselor. They can provide a neutral and safe space for you to work through those issues together.
Okay, good to know. So let's move on to something a little more proactive, setting healthy boundaries when it comes to finances.
Yeah, that's crucial for any healthy relationship, especially when it comes to money. Boundaries help create those clear expectations and prevent a lot of misunderstandings, resentment, and arguments down the road.
So what are some examples of those financial boundaries that couples should think about setting?
Well, it might be something like agreeing on a spending limit for individual purchases. So, like, you don't have to check in with each other for anything under a certain amount. Or you could set clear expectations about how much each person contributes to shared expenses. You could even define what counts as financial infidelity for you as a couple and agree on consequences if those boundaries are crossed.
Those are all really good examples. It's like creating your own financial rule book as a couple. But how do you actually have those conversations and set those boundaries in a way that feels collaborative, instead of like one person's trying to control the other?
You've got to approach it as a team effort. Schedule a time to sit down together and have that honest conversation about your values, your goals, what you each need. And remember, it's an ongoing thing. As your lives change, those boundaries might need to be adjusted too.
Right. It's about being flexible, just like with any other part of a relationship. But what about when there's a big difference in income between partners? How do you make sure decisions are fair and everyone feels valued?
That's a great point. When there's that income gap, it can lead to a power imbalance, and, that can breed resentment and conflict if you're not careful.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how do you navigate that and create a more equal financial partnership?
Well, you could have those open conversations about how much each person contributes. Maybe set up a system where both partners have equal say in making decisions. You could even look into something like a post-nuptial agreement that spells out the financial responsibilities and expectations.
Those are all really helpful strategies. But beyond just managing the practical side of money, what about the emotional side? How can couples make sure their financial partnership isn't just secure, but also fulfilling and, even joyful?
I think it's about celebrating those wins together. You hit a savings goal, great. Paid off a debt, awesome. Or maybe you just get to enjoy a special experience because you worked hard and saved for it. Those are all worth celebrating.
I love that. Acknowledging and appreciating the fruits of your labor, both as individuals and as a couple.
Exactly. And it's also about making sure your spending aligns with your values and goals. When you feel like your money's working for you in a way that feels authentic and meaningful, it brings the sense of purpose and joy to the whole relationship.
This has been such a fantastic deep dive. We've covered so much, from the basics of communication to the really complex stuff like financial infidelity and how to navigate power dynamics.
It's been a pleasure talking about all of this with you, and I hope our listeners feel more empowered to create healthier, happier, and more financially secure relationships.
Me too. And remember, building that strong financial partnership is an ongoing journey. It takes communication, compromise, and a willingness to grow and learn together. But the payoff is huge. You end up with a relationship that's not just financially secure, but also deeply connected and fulfilling. So keep those money conversations going, keep those boundaries strong, and keep diving deep into the heart of your financial partnership. Until next time.